Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the epic narrative.
We're back. Every single week, we just keep cranking out these wonderful opportunities to, I would think, to correct our vision of who God is. And then we have to deal with these, with these passages, because most of us were given these passages from somebody who had a view of God that didn't look like Jesus. And often, at least in my world, I was given a view of God from the Bible because they believed the Bible was the word of God even more than Jesus. And they would, it brings to mind this ridiculous, I do literally remember preachers from when I was a kid telling me that you could correct the Greek and Aramaic with the King James Bible. That's how much they believed the Bible was the word of God. And they were serious. Woo! Not there anymore. But anyways, some of you might still be, but I appreciate the fact you're on this journey and you're at least willing to consider some of the things that we throw out. Yeah, I appreciate those that have reached out. We've had conversations. Some don't. Can you believe this? Some don't agree with me. Some of them don't. And we're okay with that. We are okay with that. Let's just keep on talking, keep discovering, keep interacting around this amazing, amazing God of love that we love and who loves us. All right, we're going to take a look at the rest of Judges chapter 2. So we're going to start in verse 10. And basically we get a synopsis of the entire book of Judges. After that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Now, that's not like, that's hyperbole, right? That is not, they knew. What they mean is a generation, the kids grew up and they were like, we don't really have to do everything our parents did. They made the covenants. We didn't make the covenants. That sort of thing. Then verse 11, then Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served other bells. So they forsook the Lord, their God, and of their ancestors who had brought them up out of Egypt. They followed and worshiped the various gods of the people around them. And they aroused the Lord's anger because they forsook him and served Baal and Ashtaroths. In the anger against Israel, the Lord gave them into the hands of raiders who plundered them. He sold them into the hands of their enemies all around, whom they were no longer able to resist. Whenever Israel went out to fight, the hand of the Lord was against them to defeat them, just as he had said he would. And they were in great distress. Verse 16, then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hands of these raiders. Yet they would not listen to their judges, but prostituted themselves to other gods and worshiped them. They quickly turned from the ways of their ancestors who had been obedient to the Lord's commands. And whenever the Lord raised up a judge with them, he was with that judge and saved them out of the hands of the enemies as long as the judge lived. And the Lord relented because of their groaning against the oppressors. But when the judge died, the people would return to their ways, even more corrupt than their ancestors, following other gods and serving and worship them. They refused to give up their evil practices and stubborn ways. Therefore, the Lord was very angry because the nation had violated the covenant that he had ordained with the ancestors and would not listen to God. I will no longer drive them out from the nations Joshua left when he died. I will use them to test Israel and see whether they will keep the ways of the Lord and walk in it as their ancestors did. And the Lord had allowed these nations to remain. He did not drive them out. That was drive them out at once by giving them into the hands of Joshua. So, all right, that's the rest. I read the whole thing. Now I can just refer to it more or less. So when you read that passage overall, right, you get the picture that the author is writing from. He's saying, listen, Moses warned us that if we didn't follow the ways of the kingdom, the enemy would come in and wipe us out. And we would keep the hand of blessing from blessing us because we would be following after the ways of the evil one. But remember that the writers of this day believed that God was in charge of everything. So they believed that God sent the evil one. They believed that the enemy worked for God. Whether he did it on the side or did it straight up, that was up for debate as far as they were concerned. But so when they say the Lord was against them and the Lord was, caused the enemies to thrive so that they could test Israel, they believe that the Lord did it because the Lord was sending the evil one to do it. Does that make sense? So sometimes when you read it, it's like, but Bob, the Bible says that the Lord did this. It's true. And remember when you see the word anger, the Lord's anger burned against them. Remember that, yes, it could go, it's nostrils flared. It means a couple different things, but one of them for me, when I look at it, what I see is that the face of God is there. When the anger of God comes against them, the anger of God means the face of God is right in their face. He hasn't gone anywhere. That's what I like to remember when I read that word. The Lord did not abandon them. He did not say, I'm walking away from you. He said, I am going to be up in your face. I'm going to be closer now than I've ever been. Not that he can do that, but that's the picture I get when I see anger. So when you read this whole passage, remember all of those things in there so that you can understand and interact with it from a proper position that God looks like Jesus. Remember Jesus, some people say, well, he got angry. He did, but he didn't get violent. He didn't get violent. And once again, if you haven't listened to Jesus in the Temple, it's a bonus episode in season 1. I believe it's right around episode 25. It's stuck right in the middle of the life of David. All right. So we get the synopsis of the book of Judges, and it starts, remember, Judges started with Moses, Exodus 18. Judges were appointed to help litigate disputes. They were divided up in Exodus. This would all be from season 3. They were overseers of 10s and overseers of 50s and 100s and 1,000. So they were multiple judges in a tribe. Anything beyond the ones who oversaw the thousands, they were like Supreme Court justices or whatever. If it was beyond them and they couldn't figure it out, they would bring it to Moses. They helped people learn and apply the laws of God to everyday life. They were teachers as much as they were anything else. Now in Deuteronomy 16, that would be season 4. Moses calls the people to appoint judges. Now there's no qualifications that are listed there. There are some pretty intense ones in Exodus, so maybe that they knew the qualifications already. But one was they were to render justice fairly. They were not to distort. They were not to be partial. They were not supposed to take bribes. So justice, remember, justice is not. It doesn't mean the same sentence for everyone because the parties are individuals and the individuals pay differently. If you take the hand of a man who makes his living playing the guitar, it's different than taking the hand of somebody who, makes his living riding a horse. Like, it's different. Yes, you took the hand. Yes, it's punishable. Yes, you will be punished. But you're going to do it justly. You're not gonna remove from somebody their ability to make a living because it's the exact same thing as the other person, if that makes sense. So that's what judges had to figure out. I honestly, I would sometimes I think I'd like to be a judge. Now, at least here in the Western world, I think I would. I don't know about there in the Jewish world, but I think being a judge, I think because I listen to people really well. I know I don't know the law well, but I could learn that. I think I would enjoy being a judge and doing justice for families and victims and all that sort of thing. Anyways, we'll see. We'll see. Stay tuned. Maybe I'll look for job listings under judges. They were also, oh yeah, they were to pursue justice because it brings the community together. Anything less than fair and just fair justice, fair and just rulings. That's what I meant to say. Anything less than a fair and just ruling starts to divide the community, right? That, like I didn't think what happened, like I was a part of a court situation where there were three sisters who had been abused by their father. And it was horrible. It was horrible to listen to. But for me, there was no justice because these three very brave victims finally came forward against their father, who was still like it wasn't like he was divorced from the mom. Like it was horrible. They came forward, they told the truth, and in the end, the judge was like, well, basically, he seems like a nice guy. The pastor of the church that he goes to said he seems like a nice guy. These girls were young. They'll get over it. And he ended up, like on probation for 5 years, which he didn't heed because he knew the probation officer. He didn't have to do anything. It was terrible. Like I was there for support of the family. Man, I just wanted to go right over to that judge and be like, you coward. But I didn't. But clearly it still bothers me a little. Anyways, when justice isn't fair, the community starts to splinter. When the rulings aren't fair and just, people believe that they need to do something in order to create a fair and just ruling, which is why I wanted to go after, I wanted to go over the rail and extract some justice on my own. Anyways, but fair and just rulings will bring God's blessing. It brings the community together. Why? Because you reap what you sow. Right? That's it. You reap what you sow. If you sow seeds of justice and fair, equitable rulings, then the community becomes a place of honor and a place of fairness and a place of equitable connections between people. So all of that's going on. And these judges have been around for a while, right? Over 400 years, there have been judges. In the 400 years of judges, we basically get 6 detailed stories. And that's it. 6. Why so little? Well, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, I think we get so little because, again, these are stories that would be told for hours. You would hear them over and over and over again. But here in this synopsis, we see what we need to see, which is the pattern. And the pattern was when they obeyed the quote, the judge, but what were they obeying? That when you obey the principles of the kingdom, you reap the principles of the kingdom. You reap peace. You reap blessing. you reap joy, you reap hope. When you disobey the principles of the kingdom, you reap those, you reap the principles of the enemy, which is greed and self-rejection and division and yeah, it gets ugly. You don't need to go into all that. Do it? No, I don't need to go into all that. So we're trying to work this out so that well, now we're not trying to work it out. Sorry. They work it out there in chapter 2 so that you see the pattern and you know what's coming, and we get 6 stories to kind of prove it out. But every tribe had judges, and you can find 12 of them by name in the if you want to look for it. Othniel of Judah is Caleb's nephew and son-in-law. Remember, we picked that up in the book of Joshua. No. Was it the book of Joshua? Yeah, in the book of Joshua. We pick it up because Caleb was like, if anybody takes that town, I'll give him my daughter. And Othello jumped in there and he took it. And they got, so he's the nephew and son-in-law. And then Ehud came from Benjamin. Deborah came from Ephraim. Gideon came from Manasseh. You remember Gideon, right? He's the fleece guy. You remember him? Anyway, we'll get into that. Jephthah came from Gilead. Samson came from Dan. Shamgar, we don't know where he came from. Tola came from Issachar. Ibazan came from Judah. Elon came from Zebulun. Abdon came from Ephraim. Anyways, and that's what some people have worked out. I don't know. I wrote the list down because I was like, well, somebody out there might be interested and be like, oh, I'm going to look that up. So feel free. There are people that are all over this all the time. So no problems. Go for it. Feel free to write me. Let me in on the information. All right. So the major ones are the ones that, in essence, rose up to lead a large group of people out of oppression and into freedom. Right? Those are the stories that we get. Those are the ones that we're going to go over here in the book of Judges. These are the judges that rose up and took a large group of people from being raided and plundered and living in fear. They took them to a place where they were now, free. They were free from the oppression. They didn't have to live in fear. They started to have hope again. They started to prosper again because they didn't have to hide everything. I am sorry if you hear the beeping in the background. Of course, on the day that I'm recording, somebody decides to change out the dumpster. So it could be 20 minutes before that ends, but that's okay. We're gonna talk right through it. But now you know what it is. Your brain can dismiss it. So the people, freely following lesser gods, they mix their loyalty up. They mix up their cultures. They reap what they sow. They get called out again. They call out to God. God shows up. And then he releases freedom. And we see this pattern over and over again in the book of Judges. This is God. Well, this is what I want to know. I mean, this is what people look at this, right? These people freely follow other gods. They're not being forced to only follow God. And we all have that opportunity. They go after a lesser god. They go after somebody because it's convenient. They go after somebody because somebody they know who lives in the next town, they put one of these little idols out in their cornfield and the corn grew really big. And they were like, you know what? I'm going to do that too. With all of this going on, they start to reap the benefits of not being in the kingdom of God. They call out to God. God responds. Why? Because he's right there all the time. He loves his people. He is good. He sends a judge to rally the troops. Everybody gets excited. Freedom is brought, and then we move on. Now, some people look at this and they see a pattern and they believe that God is they would use the word orchestrating. I would use the word manipulating. They believe that God is manipulating the circumstances to prove a point to all the people. And they use, verse 22, God allowed this to test them, which, again, from the processing of the person who's writing this, that's what they believe. But from the life of Jesus, that's not what happened. So God's principles are going to be proven to be true. And that's what God's doing. He's testing them because he's going to say, see, I'm not lying. I'm trying to prove to you that you can't live a free, happy, hope-filled life without me. And so I'm going to whenever you walk away from me, I'm going to allow your enemies to come in. I'm going to fight for your enemies so that you lose the battles. I'm going to manipulate the weather so that all your crops die. I'm going to do everything in my power to discipline you, quote, they would say discipline, to punish you so that you come crawling back to me, and then I will be the good God and I will bring blessings. This back and forth, good God, bad God. I'm the good guy. I'm the bad guy. I'm going to be the bad guy until you beg me loud enough and long enough, and then I'll be the good guy, because if I'm not the bad guy, and, it's I don't know. For me, you really have to ask yourself, right? Do you think God makes his people fail so that he could himself, I guess, a judge and a harsh master? So by allowing enemies to win and bring death and destruction to his children, he could then prove to them that he's a good God. I mean, do you really think he did that? That God would orchestrate the death and destruction of people that he loves so that he can prove that he's a good God later? Honestly, it's really kind of fascinating to me how long I believe this, because you're just like, well, his ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are not my thoughts, and I'm just a sinner saved by grace, and how can I compare my wisdom to God's wisdom? And oh my gosh. And you live in that darkness. But I do not believe that God orchestrated, manipulated the circumstances of an entire nation or tribe of people so that he could prove to them that he was good, and when they were bad, that he would actually make them do bad, that he would lift his hedge of protection from around them so that they would end up falling, so that he could say, see, this is why you need me. Now, remember, the Lord did not pick the judges. The people did. God is seen as a divine controller by a lot of people, right? And the judge would bring people back, but control and fear and power were the forms of influence. So the people would go back to other gods when the judge died. Now, I find it fascinating how many times you'll see when we go through these judges, a lot of them use what they believe God uses, which is, manipulation and control, so that they could, sorry, I need to open my phone. They would take all of that, and they would manipulate and control the circumstances for the people so that they would, in essence, be forced to serve God, because they believed that's what God was doing. Now, in verse 23, the Lord has allowed those nations to remain. He did not drive them out at once by giving them into the hands of Joshua. God did not drive them out, i.e., kill everyone like Joshua wanted. Why do you think he didn't do that? Well, because that's not who he is. The kingdom is empowered by love. I believe that when Joshua came to the end of his life and he separated everybody, he sent them away, he decentralized the government. He gave them judges in order to, continue to use judges and priests so that the communities would come together in conversation around what the law of God said, as well as how to apply the law of God to everyday life, and the community would have these dialogues, and he wanted the community to come together. And so when the people look at what God's doing, they think God stopped killing their enemies. He stopped, quote, driving out all of these bad people. And if God had driven everybody else out, then the bad people would not have been a bad influence on them. This is a classic victim mentality, and it was seen in the entire nation. If God had only killed all of those other people, then we would be okay, because those other people are the ones who influence us. Those other people are the ones that have the gods. And so many people, so many Christians feel the same way. They look at their lives and they say, well, you see, if God had only, shut down the internet, I would have never cheated. I would have never looked at those pictures. I would have never, I already said cheated. I was thinking cheated relationally, but I was now thinking cheated like on my exam. I wouldn't have cheated on that paper. I wouldn't have cheated on my diploma. I wouldn't have cheated on my boss. I wouldn't have stolen that money. I wouldn't have, you just constantly blame the other person. I mean, I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they were telling me they were moving somewhere, and they were like, I have got to get in shape. Everybody there is going to judge me. I was like, you don't want to get in shape because somebody's judging you. They were like, yeah, I do. I was like, no. I said, if you do that, then you're a victim, and you never want to make decisions out of being a victim. And she was like, well, I want to lose weight. I was like, then let that just be enough. You want to lose weight, go lose it. There's plenty of ways to do it. I'm currently at the other end of that, where I'm like, I think I'm just going to be overweight. That's I don't know. We'll see. I'm currently overweight, and I should lose some weight, but we'll leave that go for another episode of the Epic Narrative. Anyways, you don't want the victim mentality, and that's what was going on with this particular group of people. They were looking at the quote Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, and they were like, if they were all gone, we would have been fine. If God had only killed everyone, we would be fine. And you can see it as in individuals in everyday life. They blame the teacher for not teaching them well enough. Otherwise, they would have, learned their lessons. They blame the book for not being interesting enough, or they would have read the whole thing. They blame their boss for not being, usually they look at the boss and say, well, he's rich, he's not paying me enough, or I wouldn't be struggling financially. They look at the government needs to get out of the way, or I wouldn't be so overregulated. Or they look at the government and say, the government isn't evolved enough, and they need to get more involved so that everybody gets, whatever, and then I'll be okay. They blame their preachers. They blame the Sunday school teachers. It just doesn't matter. When you have a victim mentality, it will come out in every format. And you can see entire nations like this, where they look at nations around them and they say, if all those people would just go back to where they came from, if all those people would just die, if all those people, then I would be fine. Then I could finally relax. Then I could finally be at peace. And you know what? That's an absolute lie. The victim mentality is 100% lying 100% of the time. You are not a victim, ever. You are the results of your choices, and you make choices based on your belief system. And if you believe that God is a grand master manipulator in the sky who you have to make sure is happy all the time, then you're a victim. And you will continue to have the victim's mentality as long as you then shall live. And that's what happened to the nation of Israel. And where did they start getting that mentality? They started getting that mentality way back in Exodus. They started getting that mentality probably before they left Egypt. When they gave up freedoms and compromised freedoms in Egypt in order to maintain safety, and they just started to become victims. And that victim mentality has plagued them since before the plagues. And a lot of us grew up in cultures or homes or churches where we were taught to be victims. And the results are in the way that we choose to do life now, because we have a belief system that makes God the grand master manipulator, and we are just victims of his circumstances that he controls. And when you don't know what's going on, you just say, well, God's got a plan. All right. Well, we will get going into our first judge next week. But for now, I hope you enjoyed our episode, and we look forward to another one of the Epic Narrative.
Don't go anywhere. We've got Bob Thoughts.
Hey, welcome back. You know, these cycles, I I know I said it during the episode, but you know, that was always emphasized, that these cycles were cycles that basically you almost can't help yourself, because just like the Israelites, you get sucked into sin, and then you get right with God, and then you're good with God for a while, and then you get sucked into sin, and you get distracted by idols, and then there's always a list of idols that are distracting to you, and it's usually depending on the age of the crowd, right? The speaker will adjust what those bad things are, and then if you pursue those things, then you're not following after God, which will lead you then to be destroyed by God, which will lead to the cycle continuing. And it's such a punitive picture of who God is, that basically God is waiting for the cycle to continue so that he can destroy you, to teach you the lesson that you need to learn, which is the cycle is always going to happen, and the cycle will continue to happen because, well, you can't help yourself until you get to heaven. And I don't believe that anymore, as you know. I believe you can pursue your identity and your purpose in God, and your cycle will get turned into an amazing cycle of love and joy and hope and peace, and maybe an occasional trip up, but that's exactly how it'll be treated, not as part of the cycle, but as a trip up. Like, whoops, kind of like climbing a mountain. I know I've used that illustration before as well in the podcast. You're on a trail, you trip, you get up, you start where you tripped. You don't have to start over again. It's not, you don't start the cycle again. You don't go back to the trailhead and start climbing again. You continue, because that's the nature of a journey. That's the nature of a relationship. You work through the tough time, and then you keep going. And soon, tough times get fewer and fewer and fewer, to the point where you go years without tripping up. because that's the nature of love. You get stronger and you get more focused and you become more of who you were created to be, and you don't trip up over this. So the cycle that we will see continuing in Judges will be there for sure, but I don't think it's an illustration of what we are all doomed to continue to do for the rest of our lives, because God is good, and he will continue to be good, and we will find him in his goodness over and over and over again in this season. I am excited as always about next season. I just wrote another episode. We are sorry, the first season on David went, I think, 52 episodes. We are going to do more than that. I'm thinking it'd be closer to 60 by the time we're done. Just because I'm doing it a little different now. I think I hit like I said, we kind of have a better rhythm. I still want to do maybe a subscription to a weekly study along with that season, but that's a long time. If we end up with 60 plus episodes, that's over a year commitment. So we'll see. Excuse me. We'll see how that goes. But anyways, God is good, and we're going to continue. If you can support what we're doing here, like I said, we're trying to get $5,000 in this year. We've gotten some, and I appreciate those of you that give. We take it mostly through Apple Pay. Most people send it to my phone, those who can. So yeah, just reach out to me in direct message, and I will tell you the different ways that we can receive money. And it would be awesome, because I did do another promotional piece that'll be coming out in an online magazine. Greatly appreciate that opportunity. Very grace-filled journalistic magazine. So we'll stand out, because we don't write, we podcast, but man, I write a lot. I just don't write it in a magazine form, and that's okay. But hopefully those of you that enjoy that magazine will also enjoy the storytelling that we do on the Epic Narrative. And I am looking forward to the Rethinking God with Rethinking God with Tacos. They do have a podcast. You should listen to that as well. Rethinking God with Tacos conference, which will be coming up in the fall. And I would love to do advertising there as well as merchandise there. And that's really what the goal is for that $5,000. I just really would like to see and do more on that end, because I think we have a wonderful product. We got tons of material, or what do they call it? Not material. Oh, I forget. There's a word for it. But we got a lot of it. And I think we have a really good thing going on. So anyways, I look forward to seeing you guys, talking to you guys, hearing from you guys. Feel free to reach out. Love y'all. I'll see you next week on The Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com, or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.